It's your friendly neighborhood Bibliothecary Morgan here. Today we're starting a new series where we're going to be reading through Chicago by Day and Night, a guidebook written by an anonymous author in 1892 in preparation for the World's Columbian Exposition, or the Chicago's World Fair in 1893. Content warning, this book is a reflection of the attitudes and language that was used in the late 1800s. Keep in mind that there may be language that is racist, homophobic, ableist, and just generally problematic. I'll do my best to provide warnings at the start of chapters that are particularly bad. Also, if you want to read along with me, I've included a link to Hathy Trust in the description. So without further ado, grab your cuppa, make yourself comfortable, and let's start reading. Chicago by Day and Night. The Pleasure Seeker's Guide to the Paris of America. Introductory. At a time when the attention of the world is concentrated upon Chicago, as it is at present, it is fitting that the stranger within its gates, as well as the uninitiated native, should be made aware of the various attractions of all sorts and conditions possessed by the future metropolis of the United States. Chicago has been called the Paris of America, that title having been bestowed upon it by some bright-minded and discerning person who evidently knew whereof he spoke. That the title is indisputable goes without saying. In no other city of its size on the continent is the same variety of amusements to be found as in this one. All tastes may be promptly satisfied, all preferences catered to, if, when confronted by the marvelously variegated array of recreations and pursuits that this great city has to offer, the stranger or the periodical visitor should turn away dissatisfied, imagining that he has failed to discover anything especially suited to his fancy, his mental and physical organism must be sadly askew. It is his fault, and not Chicago's. From now on and for the next year or so, this mighty city by the lake will swarm with myriads of men and women of all races, tribes, and languages, being brought hither by the great exposition that is destined to be the marvel of all nations. That some of this floating mass will remain here is beyond question. In that case, the population will swell until the 2 million mark is passed, and in the proportion that the population increases, so also will increase the attractions of the city that harbors it. It is the purpose of the present work to set forth in a terse but comprehensive manner the various sorts of entertainment offered by the coming metropolis. The author, while sufficiently modest to keep his identity a secret, makes bold to assert that no person who scans the pages of this book will be able, after he has done so, to lay claim to ignorance of the means whereby to procure entertainment or solace for such hours of idleness as he may find on his hands during his stay in this city. The present area of Chicago is a fraction over 180 square miles. What its area will be next year or 10 years hence, nobody can predict. For the present, it is sufficient to know that within that area of 180 square miles, there dwells a community active, energetic, mercurial, eager in business, and therefore keen in its thirst for recreation outside of business hours. The present work is undertaken in no spirit of levity or thoughtlessness. Its author is a man of the world who, recognizing the desire of the average man to be amused when the cares of business are done, and being fully cognizant of the qualifications of the city in the amusement line, aims to instruct the uninitiated wayfarer in the paths he may follow with the most satisfaction to himself and the greatest benefit to his system. If but one reader confesses his indebtedness to this work for enlightenment in the smallest degree, its purpose will have been achieved. With renewed assurances, therefore, that the seeker after light upon a great city's manner of amusing itself will not seek in vain, the author makes his bow to the reader and tenders him an invitation to accompany him through the following pages. Chapter 1. Where to Stay. The question of location must, of course, be decided by the individual taste of the visitor. It would be strange indeed if, with a transient population roughly estimated at 200,000, the city did not possess hotels of all grades and descriptions, from which the most capricious-minded person might take his choice and procure satisfaction. Chicago at the present writing contains at least 1,500 hotels, with constant additions each year. There is no more difficult task than to tell a man with any accuracy what hotel will suit him best. A caravansary that would delight one man would disgust another, and vice versa. The most satisfactory plan, therefore, and the safest, is to give a brief pen sketch of the leading hotels, with some idea of the special characteristics of each and the style of entertainment they afford. The lakefront hotels, the Richelieu, Auditorium, and Leland, enjoy the cream of the new transient patronage. By new is meant those people who have never before visited Chicago, and who naturally select the houses with the prettiest sights. The Auditorium, Michigan Avenue and Congress Street, despite its gorgeousness and the flourish of trumpets with which it was opened, does not indulge in ruinous rates. It is a very large hotel, and accommodations may be had therein from $4 per day up. Perhaps it is this moderate charge that makes it so great a favorite with the theatrical profession, the more prosperous members of which enjoy the comfort it affords. Well-to-do managers, famous stars, and sometimes interrogatively opulent soubrettes and chorus girls seek lodging at the Auditorium, and some very pretty romances are narrated of flirtations more or less interesting than the blooded habitues of this swell hotel strike-up with the fair footlight favorites who enjoy its hospitality. It is worth the price of a day's board, or at least a dinner sometimes, to take a stroll in the corridors and catch the fragments of delicious lays that are being caroled forth by the songbirds who are practicing their chosen art in the sanctity of their various chambers. Especially is this the case during a season of grander light opera in the great theater adjoining the hotel, in which case the latter is sure to be thronged with singers of both sexes, and of all grades of artistic and professional prominence. There is a roomy balcony over the entrance to the auditorium, which, on pleasant days, is thronged with gaily dressed people of both sexes who sit there and enjoy the dual delight of drinking in the balmy air and watching the cavalcade on the broad avenue below. A block north of the auditorium is the Richelieu, the famous hostelry the destinies of which are presided over by the renowned Cardinal Bemis. For people of means, to whom money is less of an object than the engagement of luxuries, the Richelieu, they say, is the place par excellence at which to stop. Some notable people have honored the Richelieu with their presence, and one is just as liable to run plumb against a real live English lord or Italian marquis within its doors as against a plain everyday American citizen. Sarah Bernhardt selects the Richelieu when in the city. So does Mrs. Langtry when the confines of her private car become too narrow for comfort. The Richelieu is famous for the rare pictures that adorn its walls, some of which are worth small fortunes, and also, whisper this with bated breath, O ye irreverent, for its wine cellars, which are stocked with some of the rarest and costliest vintages to be found on the entire continent. On state occasions, when the cardinal is entertaining some choice party of notables, he is wont to disappear suddenly, absent himself for about 15 minutes, and then reappear with a quaint bottle or two in either hand covered with cobwebs. Those who sample the contents of said bottles close their eyes, pat their stomachs softly as the divine liquid glides down their throats, and then shed tears of joy and gratitude to the cardinal for having given them the happiest moment of their lives. If you are a connoisseur of wines and wish to test your art and judgment thereof, cultivate the acquaintance of the cardinal, and perhaps he will go down into the cellar for you. Mr. Warren Leland, who recently sold the hotel of that name, always said he had the prettiest house in Chicago, and there are some people who agree with him. The Leland rates on the American plan are from $3 to $5 per day up, the European $1.50 up. The Leland is known as the home hotel of Chicago, and there is a tradition abroad to the effect that people who once patronize it never go elsewhere. The Blooded District. Before proceeding to the consideration of other prominent hotels, it may be interesting to inform the reader that the district we are about to leave, and of which the 3 hostelries enumerated form the nucleus, has achieved some fame in the annals of the town as the Blooded District, so called for the reason that the high-rolling young men of the city have made it a sort of headquarters or rendezvous, both before and after the hours when sober-minded and steady-going folk are fast asleep. The Auditorium, Richelieu, and Leland cafes, together with Divine's wine room on the other side of Jackson Street and Colonel John Harvey's Wayside Inn in the alley, form a sort of circuit or beat, which these rapid young men, i.e. the Bloods, travel at all times, including such hours as the sale of cheering beverages is forbidden by city ordinance. Of these, Harvey's is perhaps the most unique resort, though if one cannot find his friends in one of the places named after midnight, he is tolerably certain to encounter them in one of the others. Colonel Harvey is the father of the pert little soubrette Hattie Harvey, of whom the great diva, Patty, became so desperately enamored as to invite her to her castle in Wales, and admirers of the young lady are fond of dropping in to discuss her merits with her papa, the colonel, who, it goes without saying, is the most devoted of her admirers. If you praise Hattie's beauty to the colonel, he will mix for you with his own hands one of his choicest drinks. If you swear on your honor that she is destined to become the greatest actress of the century, he will probably crack a bottle. The door of Harvey's Wayside Inn is tightly closed at midnight, but the initiated may gain ready admittance by learning the password of the night and roaring it in tones more or less musical through the keyhole. You can always tell whether there is any fun going on in Harvey's by the galaxy of hackmen who stand in line at the curb, waiting for the boys to emerge in the small hours of the morning. But we may now leave the Blooded district and take a glance at other South Side hotels. The venerable Palmer House stands like a bulwark at the corner of State and Monroe Streets, its vast expanse stretching away for half a block. The Palmer enjoys a steady patronage from people who have been putting up there for years. It has a large clientele of the better class of commercial travelers. The wits of the town crack jokes at the expense of the Palmer on the score of the number of guests of Hebraic extraction at shelters. Be that as it may, the Palmer welcomes all who pay their bills, and those who patronize it generally possess that admirable qualification. The Palmer's rates are $3 to $5 per day. There is a little room on the 6th floor of the Palmer, which is an environ of romantic interest, it having been the scene of one of the most famous tragedies in Chicago's history. In the summer of 1882, it was occupied by Charles Stiles, the popular and high-living caller of the Board of Trade. Early one morning, a veiled woman, whose tasteful but somber raiment revealed the outlines of an entrancing figure, took the elevator to the 6th floor and knocked at the door of Stiles's room. He came out scantily clad in response to the summons. There was a flash, the ringing report of a revolver, and in another instant the young man lay dead on the floor. The woman knelt down, kissed his forehead, and submitted to arrest without a murmur. She was an Italian, Teresa Sterlata by name, and the mistress of Stiles. His previous abuse of her, as testified to at the trial, so influenced the jury in her behalf that she received but the nominal punishment of 1 year in the penitentiary, though her great beauty doubtless had some influence on the leniency of the sentence. Many men went daft over the beautiful murderess. Some of the letters that she received while in jail were published, and precious epistles they were, too. They all contained protestations of affection, and several offers of marriage were included among them. The woman went to the penitentiary and served her sentence. When released, she disappeared as completely as though the earth had swallowed her. Her present whereabouts is unknown, but the room made famous by the great tragedy is still pointed out to new guests at the Palmer. The Grand Pacific on South Clark Street, kept by landlord Drake, is of the same class as the Palmer, enjoying a steady patronage all year round. The rates are $3 to $5 per day. The Tremont, kept by Mr. Eden, Lake and Dearborn, and the Sherman, kept by Mr. Pierce, Clark and Randolph, are of the same grade as the Palmer and Grand Pacific. These comprise the list of first-class downtown hotels, though several others are in progress of construction, with a view to caring for the thousands of strangers who will visit the World's Fair. Notable among these is the Great Northern, which, under the supervision of Mr. Eden, has just been pushed to completion. It is on Dearborn Street opposite the post office, between Jackson and Quincy, being situated therefore in the very heart of the business district. The Victoria, the new hotel on the site of the building formerly known as the Beau Rivage, Michigan Avenue and Congress Street, is a fashionable house patronized by the best people. The same is true of the Wellington, corner of Jackson Street and Wabash Avenue. The smaller hotels are much too numerous to particularize. They are scattered in all directions, and their rates for rooms vary from 50 cents upward per day. There is no street in the business part of the city without 2 or 3 such hotels, and the traveler must be hard to please who cannot suit himself at one or another among so many. The resident part of the city, particularly on the north and south sides, is thickly dotted with first-class family hotels, where persons contemplating an extended stay may obtain quiet accommodation in the exact ratio for which they care to pay. The 2 most magnificent family hotels are the Virginia, 78 Rush Street, and the Metropole, Michigan Avenue and 23rd Street. These 2 houses cannot be surpassed for style and elegance, and they are patronized exclusively by people of means. That was the first 2 chapters of Chicago by Day and Night. Thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, I'll catch you later. But be sure to come back and visit the Bibliothecary.